In many households throughout America, life is temporarily turned upside down when a family member is born with a disability. But these families quickly realize that many blessings accompany the unexpected. Today, you'll hear the perspective of those with disabilities as well as those who love them. Stay with us. Chip and Donna Hammond are natives of Round Hill, Virginia. They were already parents of 3 children, Trey, Caitlin, and Nathan, when they welcomed their 4th child, Becca, into the world. Since the time of her birth, Becca's parents suspected something might be different about their daughter. She had problems eating and was a little delayed physically, but they weren't too concerned until she began having seizures at 8 months old.
We were getting ready to go on a family reunion, and I heard Donna yell. She said, Rebecca just had a seizure. We called 911. And she was rushed to the hospital, and that was really the first indication. I mean, it was it took quite a long time really to realize the extent of the difficulties that she would have.
Yeah, that she has structural problems with her brain that causes the seizures and also her other delays.
Becca has battled seizure disorders for the past 8 years, and her development has slowed to a crawl. After much testing, the doctors diagnosed her with cortical dysplasia, which means the entire right side of her brain doesn't function. Becca doesn't speak or respond to directions very well and is cognitively about 1 year old. But she walks and is very healthy in almost every other way, and she positively impacted the Hammond family and everyone she meets.
One of the things when she was younger is that they would talk about her having, they wouldn't say autism, but they would say autistic-like behaviors. She would be very much, kind of in her own world. But as she's gotten older, she's become more cognizant of other people. So she, she doesn't show affection in typical ways, but she'll, to her brothers or sisters or to myself or Donna, she'll be running around and then she'll just, run up and lean into you or put her mouth on you or something like that.
She does have her kisses.
Yeah.
And she hugs her family members.
Yeah.
She does. And when I'm introducing her to new children who don't know her and could be uncomfortable and not understand why she's not answering their questions or interacting with them the way they'd expect her to, I tell them, I'll ask them, well, how many of you like to wrestle with your dad? And they all raise their hand. I said, well, Rebecca likes to wrestle with her dad and tickle with her dad. And how many of you like to go swimming? Oh, I love to go swimming. Well, Rebecca loves to go swimming. And I try to point, she has her joys and her interests just like they do, that she can't communicate what she likes as well. But just like she's more like them than not like them. She loves to be on the trampoline, she loves to be on the slide or just running around outside. She likes to roll a ball. By herself. She likes to roll a ball and chase it. She has different toys that she likes to play with. A bath, a long bath. Hour and a half she'll spend, as long as the water will stay warm. Water's her absolute favorite thing. She actually becomes a different child in the water. More interactive, better eye contact, more aware. Just the pressure of the water seems to be very stabilizing to her nervous system, and she just loves being in the water.
Life is different with somebody like Becca. What are the struggles that you face in day-to-day life?
She has to be watched all the time. When she's home, she's very impulsive, has no real sense of the danger of things. So she has turned on the gas on the stove accidentally if she's gotten in there. And so we have to make sure that someone's always watching her, and that makes things a little complicated.
How are you able to communicate with Becca? Say there's a moment in life where you need to teach her or instill in her something for her safety or for day-to-day life. How do you accomplish that task?
Repetition.
Yeah.
Over and over and over. And something that might take another child a few times takes hundreds and hundreds of times for Rebecca. She understands the word no, and so that's our go-to word when we need her to stop or to pay attention. No. Well, usually she'll stop and look at us if we say no.
Yeah, and she's not a, how to put it, she's not, she doesn't have a, any kind of a malicious spirit. She's a very kind of an, easy, compliant child with what she's capable of doing.
How do her brothers and sister interact with her?
I mean, phenomenally well, and that was, as it became clearer that there was something wrong with Rebecca that was going to impact the family, I was concerned that the other children may be resentful, when they were young. But that's not been the case at all. They're extremely protective of her, extremely affectionate toward her. And I'd have to say, Brad, that it's had a kind of an amazing effect in that when our kids say go to the grocery store and there'll be like maybe somebody working as a bagger with Down syndrome, and other people may be uncomfortable with that. My kids aren't at all uncomfortable with people who are, who may have cognitive disabilities.
So would you say your kids have been affected in a positive way as a result of Becca being in the family?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And we have friends who will say, your children are so compassionate beyond their years, are patient, are tender-hearted. And so it's nice to hear from other people that they've noticed those things that we've seen in our children.
When we return, we'll meet a man who's overcoming a muscle disability to bring beautiful art to his community. John Siebold is a retired mechanical engineer from Frankfort, Kentucky. All his life, he suspected there might be something different about him. As a kid, he had trouble keeping up with friends, tired easily, and couldn't jump very high. But it wasn't until he was 55 years old that he was finally diagnosed with muscular dystrophy. To cope with his illness, John took up painting as a creative and cathartic outlet. John, what is muscular dystrophy, and when were you first diagnosed with it?
Muscular dystrophy is a degeneration of the muscles in your body. I don't have it as bad as Jerry Lewis's kids do. My muscles degenerate at a very slow rate. I have what they call limb-girdle muscular dystrophy.
So is the reality that you're slowly losing control of your muscles?
They're getting weak, not losing control, they're getting weak. And from the weakness, I can't hold my hand up as long as you can, or raise my arms up for a long period of time. And my legs will tire out very quickly when I'm walking. And my back. The back is really more the problem than anything else. It gets weak, and I'll have to sit down and I'll have to rest. And after resting for a while, I can get up and go do it, go move around again.
So these are symptoms you've had most of your life?
I've had most of my life. I just never realized that they were something unusual.
John, how long have you been painting?
I've been only painting for about, let's say 10 years.
When did you start painting?
I started painting when I got down in Kentucky. I took classes at KSU, and that's where it started. And I dealt with acrylics, and then eventually went to oil. But ever since I was a kid, I was drawing pictures. And I've even taken some classes in drawing. And I always got compliments on my work. People never said, well, you got to really look at that. I always got compliments initially. Even this painting behind here, it was painted to represent a photograph. That's the first one I did.
The very first one?
The very first one I did with it.
Can you walk me through the painting process? What motivates you? What moves you to complete a particular project?
I have to see something unique. I have to see, like this painting. This is a good example. A dog's in a bunch of bushes. How many times do you see a dog in a bushes looking like this? That's unique. And with the buffalo, the initial position of this buffalo was unique. He wasn't a buffalo running down the field or standing on the side. He initially come from picture where he was frozen practically. When you see him, you think he was all frozen, but he wasn't. He was alive. That's the way they lived. I mean, they can take the ice. So that's the way it attracted me. And that's usually what every one of the paintings, that's what will attract me to want to paint. I want to redo that and put my own little touch on it.
Are there other things you do differently because of the muscular dystrophy?
Now, I won't put the painting up on an easel like some instructors want me to do. I will have it laying down. I have to be sitting down. I can't stand up. That would be the other thing.
John, has your disability in any way detracted from your quality of life?
No. That I would work to prevent that from happening. I will do whatever it takes to get that done. And any other projects around the house, they take longer, but they get done. I will not let that stop me.
In a moment, we'll meet an amazing young man who doesn't let cerebral palsy stop him from making a difference on Capitol Hill. Aaron Welty is a native of southeast Michigan who was born 10 weeks premature and diagnosed with cerebral palsy. His mother and father made the decision to treat him as a normal kid, to challenge Aaron instead of coddling him. As a result of his upbringing, Aaron was determined to do his best to make a difference. When only 13 years old, Aaron knew he wanted to work on Capitol Hill with Congress. For the past 5 years, he's been working as a legislative assistant to Representative Thaddeus McCotter. Aaron hopes to continue working to bring attention to many important issues.
When I was born at 30 weeks, I was severely underdeveloped, and there were some issues with like blood and fluid on the brain. And when that happens, one of two things will generally occur. Either the cranial cavity will grow larger to accommodate the extra material that's there, or the pressure will take part of the brain and crush it and render it inoperable. And the second thing, the crushing of part of the brain and rendering it inoperable, is what happened to me. As a result of that and some other things that happened really early on, I came to understand that I have cerebral palsy. And again, my understanding is that once you have it, you have it. As you grow up and you get older, it's kind of like arthritis, I guess. Things just get difficult, and the weather starts to affect things, and you have to deal with a lot of pain. And so I've just kind of dealt with that, and I do what I have to do, and then I decided to come here and be in this environment on top of all that. So.
But it's a physical disability and not a mental disability, correct?
Well, it can be both. In my case, it's more physical. For example, when I was born, the doctor said, he'll never walk, he'll be severely mentally impaired, he'll always be a burden to those around him and those taking care of him, and he'll never really accomplish much in his life.
Well, that was a pretty picture, wasn't it?
No, and I'm very fortunate that my mom and my dad and my grandma kind of looked at the doctors and said, well, we don't believe you, and we're going to see what happens.
Aaron, tell me a little bit about your boss, briefly, and what it is that you do for him.
Okay. The congressman that I work for is Thaddeus McCotter from Michigan's 11th District. It's southeast Michigan, outside of Detroit. From a young age, about 13 years old, I knew that I wanted to come to Washington, D.C. and to work in Congress. I began to realize around that time that I was born in America. I could have been born somewhere else in the early 80s. Where I would not necessarily have been safe and my life wouldn't have been as secure as it is. And so I had to find a way to kind of give back. Friends of mine had suggested, why don't you go to Washington? And I kind of grabbed that idea and ran with it. Here we are. It's tougher than people think, and I work on a portfolio of about a dozen different issues, and among those, religious freedom and the pro-life issue and family issues and education. I really do enjoy working on the pro-life issue, partially because of my own story that we're telling today, and the fact that I'm still here when I should not be.
One of the greatest concerns Aaron faced when coming to Washington, D.C. was how he'd get around the city. Fortunately, his dad came up with a creative means of transportation in which Aaron could navigate the city. He's even been contacted by NASA with questions about his unusual vehicle. Aaron, tell me about the Phoenix project, version 4.2 now.
Oh gosh, I love the Phoenix project. That came out of just my need to be able to safely get around the different places that I was at. The current iteration, 4.2, is what I use to get around Washington. And basically what it is it's a old three-wheeled scooter that I used to use in college, and it had died out. And my dad got it running again. That's part of the reason why we call it the Phoenix. And he built this sort of space-age looking cockpit shell around it with headlights and taillights and a fan and just all sorts of different switches and things. And when I drive around it, I'm pretty much completely covered, and I'm safe and away from the wind and rain and snow. And I've kind of developed a bit of a reputation on Capitol Hill because of it, because I'm the only one in the world who has one, because, you know, my dad built it for me.
And it's really cool.
Well, thank you very much. We happen to think so too.
Coming up, we'll hear how people with disabilities should never give up hope and strive to live a meaningful life. Though Becca Hammond, John Siebold, and Aaron Welty may face some physical or mental challenges in life, it hasn't stopped them or their families from striving to make an impact on the people around them.
I have a good friend. He once explained the relationship I have with the Phoenix as basically the Phoenix is Superman's cape. And it's the thing that gets everybody's attention. And then you get to stop and introduce yourself and tell them about what the Phoenix is. And then they'll start asking other questions, which leads you to kind of explain the backstory to my life in terms of just the pro-life angle and what it was like growing up, and just the wonderful Christian family that I got to grow up in. And
how do you think it impacts them?
You know, in more cases than not, I think the conversation gets to a point where it kind of gets them thinking in terms of, well, maybe these folks who have difficulty, you know, getting around, maybe the perception that I have of them and what their life is like isn't quite what it really is. I mean, because if you're able to get around in something like that and look like you're mobile and you're able to just continue and have life be as, you know, quote unquote normal as possible, it's like, well, maybe the perception that society has for these kind of folks and the circumstances of how they came into the world and things that they deal with, that their quality of life is actually possible and it's good. And I think that is able to serve as a good counterweight to one of the prevailing pieces of wisdom in society right now that's erroneous, that says the quality of life for these folks really isn't possible. So in more cases, we shouldn't give them the chance at life that they deserve.
I'm not one that likes to sit around. My wife may argue about that, but I don't like to sit around and do nothing. I gotta have something. I gotta be doing something. I gotta be thinking about doing something. I've always been that way. And and then even when I was diagnosed and I was feeling sorry for myself, the doctor looked at me and he said, "You got a brain. Use it." Anybody with a handicap should not use it as a handicap and live in their lives. Figure out what you need in order to do what you want.
There's no one that doesn't encounter and bear heavy burdens in their lives, whether it is their child or their parent or some other loved one or themselves, a health problem. We just don't know what the future holds, and God gives us grace for everything that comes our way. And that just because a serious health issue has been diagnosed doesn't mean that there's not joy and there's not accomplishments to be proud of, and that God will enable them to be strong when they need to be strong, and will provide lots of joy in the journey.
Can you ever imagine life without Becca?
just like any of our other children, just the thought of her not being here is,
Yeah.
no, it's not. I can't imagine that.
So in that case, you wouldn't view her any differently than your other children?
No.
No. No.
These inspirational stories of individuals overcoming mental and physical obstacles are only the beginning. Join us next week for part 2, where we'll meet an amazing woman who hasn't let spina bifida derail her dream of becoming a dancer. We'll also hear Aaron, John, Chip, and Donna's thoughts on choosing life for babies born with disabilities, and their belief every person, no matter their physical capabilities, has tremendous worth.